Hello, my name is Tyler, and I've been sitting on this video for about a week now. I really want to make this video for the past few days, but every time I go to sit down to record, I can't really find the right words to talk about it and really just how to approach this, so I really think it's just best if I just sit down and talk about what I want to talk about. Last week, I finished one of the most impactful books I've ever read in my entire life. I'm not someone who likes to engage in hyperboles too often by saying something's like a masterpiece, or something is life-changing, or really anything like that, but I finished one of the few books I've ever read where I genuinely didn't want it to end. And I've talked to Mark about that a lot frequently, or you might know him as Drunzo, where he really just kind of goes like, oh, I didn't want this book to end. It was just so engaging that by the time that final page came through, I just didn't want it to end. And I've never had that before, frankly. I love reading, and I've loved numerous types of books and numerous different types of authors, but I've never really had that feeling of, oh, please don't end. I want this to keep going. I want to stay in this world. And I just recently finished that with Stoner by John Williams. I first actually heard about Stoner by John Williams when I was at a bookstore with Mark and Matt, and I was in the corner at a separate section looking at something, and Mark shouted from the corner, "Tyler, look at this book!" And he ran over and he gave me Stoner by John Williams, and he said, everyone who reads it adores it. It's one of those type of books that has like this cult following. It's not super popular, but it's well known enough that people read it, they love it. And he's like, it's about an English teacher, and you would love it. And since I'm an English teacher and I want to teach eventually college, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll buy it. Why not? I trust your recommendation. And I waited about a week or two after getting it to finally sit down and read it. And when I did, I was kind of blown away. Today is going to be a non-spoiler review, talk about whatever this is about this book. I'm not going to give any specific details. I just kind of want to talk about general overviews about really everything and just try to convey why I love this book so much. I'd actually never heard of John Williams as an author before. When I first heard of John Williams, I was like, the composer for Star Wars wrote a book? That's kind of weird. But when you actually look him up, he doesn't have many other books. He wrote one, a kind of a narrative focus about the start of Rome called Augustus. He has one called Butcher's Crossings, which I'm very interested in. But as you can see, I have kind of fallen in love with this book. I don't often mark chapters or important things in it, but there is something very fitting about constantly adding a section and adding a little bookmark here so I can go back and reread this later, because there are some genuinely brilliantly written sections that I can see myself flipping through one day and going, oh yeah, this section, or oh man, I remember this part right here, and just reading stuff again, because again, I don't really know how to convey it in words, and I've been struggling to make this video a lot, but there's just something so magnetic about the human experience in this book. But specifics about this book really is that it details the life of William Stoner, who is a young man in Missouri who eventually works on a farm and then eventually goes to college to study agriculture and then falls in love with English and learning and literature, and then eventually we find out about the rest of his life. I really don't want to go into too many specifics about this because I feel like this is something that everyone should go in blind. I have never been so routinely touched and felt like my experiences as a learner, as an individual, as an English teacher were so unilaterally defined in a book before. I am blown away that this is a book written in the 60s and captures experience in our pre-World War I and pre-World War II, that kind of early 20th century, and is able to capture such contemporary and modern feelings. I know 100 years ago isn't super long ago, but there are some definite similarities to what I go through and what teachers go through and what you guys as readers and learners go through on a daily basis. That raw connection to books and that excitement of finding something new like I felt with this book, and really just how you dive into it and your passions in life. And there's just something I think for everyone here. I think this book tackles such universal human experiences that I think it's approachable for everyone. Even someone who isn't super into learning and reading or just reading books in general, I think can find something in this book, and the prose is not too difficult, and it's inaccessible to those who really just want to get into a higher level of reading. To me, when I read this book, it felt like a very grown-up version of Catcher in the Rye. It felt like that kind of next step forward. If you're someone like me who has grown up or influenced heavily by Catcher in the Rye in your high school, or reading it in maybe your junior year, which is, for my non-American viewers, you're about 15 to 17 years old. That's typically the age range for your junior year. This feels like the continuation of that. What would happen if Holden Caulfield lived a slightly different life, and his universal understandings and reflections upon society and people grew up in a different society, in a different type of environment. And I find that to be so enthralling that I frankly couldn't put this book down. And the only reason why it took me about a week to read is because I would reread entire chapters and sections in 20 to 30 pages at a time, just while reading it because I wanted to experience it all again. That's how magnetic and charming and just enthralling this book is. And it's not like a lot of stuff even happens in this book. It really just tells about the life of this man, William Stoner, but there's just something about it, and I'm really struggling to put into words. I think the best way to really just convey my thoughts on this book is just to read some certain sections from it. But I'm going to read the very first page in a paragraph. Actually, it's the first 2 paragraphs of the entire book, just to get a sense of what this book establishes and why I think immediately you'll be drawn into it, and why I was drawn so heavily into it. William Stoner entered the University of Missouri as a freshman in the year 1910, at the age of 19. 8 years later, during the height of World War I, he received his doctorate of philosophy degree and accepted an instructorship at the same university, where he taught until his death in 1956. He did not rise above the rank of assistant professor, and few students remembered him with any sharpness after they had taken his courses. When he died, his colleagues made a memorial contribution of a medieval manuscript to the university library. This manuscript may still be found in the rare books collection, bearing the inscription, "Presented to the Library of University of Missouri in memory of William Stoner, Department of English," by his colleagues. An occasional student who comes upon the name may wonder idly who William Stoner was, but he seldom pursues his curiosity beyond a casual question. Stoner's colleagues, who held him in no particular esteem when he was alive, speak of him rarely now. To the older ones, his name is a reminder of the end that awaits them all, and to the younger ones, it is merely a sound which evokes no sense of the past and no identity with which they can associate themselves or their careers. That's the first 2 paragraphs of the entire book. John Williams is essentially saying that this character's life amounted to nothing of importance. He lived and he died without making a mark on the world. And then the point of the book after that is to show the folly in thinking like that someone who leaves no tangible mark didn't have any human experiences. And then what we see is the sensitivity and the treatment treated to male characters and male teachers at the time, specifically in a society that was so uptight, might be the right word, and so defined by its morals and its rigidness, and not in really the sense of how we view something from a 2021 lens. The first 2 paragraphs of this book are astonishing, frankly. I'm even stumbling over my words right now. To definitively say that this character's life amounted to nothing, and then have that be the introduction to then 270 pages of this character's life, and John Williams' unique touch as to what makes human characters feel emotions, and how they operate within a society, and how they operate with others, and how they approach love, and their love not just with others, but with their learning, and their passions, and their interest, is so sensitive and impactful to me as someone who is, I guess, technically an adult, of the age of an adult, but does not feel like it at times. To find something that so touches on my inner psyche is something that is really impactful, especially when I'm trying to really get more into reading and really approach this wide range of diverse topics and diverse books and, engaging in a bunch of different experiences and perspectives on the world. It's really amazing to find something so grounded and something that so heavily impacts you. I'm always someone as a reader who's trying to engage in new perspectives. I think that's how we build empathy as people. And as a teacher, when I'm interacting with students who have the widest range of experiences in life and stuff that I could never understand, I want to learn because I want to be a better teacher and better to empathize with them. There is something so meaningful to me as a reader and a person to find something that so touches on my very existence. I know I'm not the first one to talk about this book. I think there's a bunch of YouTube videos out there that you could watch that say, like, Stoner, John Williams, the book that changed my life. Or I think even PewDiePie mentioned this in a book review where he was talking about, like, I read this book and it's amazing. I'm not the first one, and I'm never going to be the last one. And frankly, I would love if more people could read this. And I'm actually going to read more sections from this just to kind of paint a picture. But I don't often say this too much about a book, but there's just something about it. And I always try to piece together words and try to offer an explanation, but I'm kind of befuddled about this, and I frankly just really wanted to talk about it. I'm going to read a few sections from this book. They're not spoilers. They're just little descriptions about observations that I have highlighted in yellow. General ones are in pink for me, and the larger ones are in yellow. Just passages that stuck with me that I can see myself going back and rereading really at any time in my life, and I think that's just something that I just want to show you guys. In his 43rd year, William Stoner learned what others much younger had learned before him, that the person one loves at first is not the person one loves at last, and that love is not an end, but a process through which one person attempts to know another. Simple, but it's effective. John Williams takes these larger ideas of life and grounds them. It's how he kind of takes these almost overwhelming human experiences and grounds them into the experience of one man. It's very impressive writing, and the prose of this is so fluid and natural that the pages just fly together. John Williams has a really great talent for sentence structure and sentence length. Will he have kind of the punctuation right? So everything flows perfectly natural. So all of a sudden, you've read 85 pages in a day and you're like, I don't know where the time went. It's honestly incredible how he's able to balance this fluid, natural writing while still approaching some different angles. Here's another section. In his extreme youth, Stoner had thought of love as an absolute state of being to which, if one were lucky, one might find access. In his maturity, he had decided it was the heaven of a false religion, toward which one ought to gaze with an amused disbelief, a gentle, familiar contempt, and an embarrassed nostalgia. Now, in his middle age, he began to know that it was neither a state of grace nor an illusion. He saw it as a human act of becoming a condition that was invented and modified, moment by moment and day, by the will and intelligence of the heart. I mean, I'm at a loss for words there, guys. I mean, describing love of heaven of a false religion, especially when you are so spurned by it, or when you have such kind of negative implications and negative experiences with love, is just the most incredible way to describe it. I was baffled by it. I really was. Reading this, I had highlighted it. I wrote a bunch of lines there. I was like, I'm going to come back to this and just marvel at the way of observations flow through this paragraph. This book also deals with a lot of themes of nihilism. And if you don't know what nihilism is kind of the idea that nothing has meaning. And I guess the best way to describe who I am is I'm an optimistic nihilist, which is just a crazy thing to even say because that's a horrible oxymoron just right off the bat. But I like to think that there's beauty in the world while also realizing that it's not really, it's kind of all pointless. If you're a big fan of BoJack Horseman, that's basically existential nihilism. If you haven't already, if you're a big fan of nihilism, go check that out. I think my generation, millennials and younger, are dealing with that kind of sense of nihilism because of a large kind of external circumstances of what's going on in the world right now. Climate change. I'm in America, so potential collapse of America, democracy. We're kind of going with a lot of stuff there, and I don't want to get into politics, but there's kind of that. But this book does deal with some nihilism, and this is specifically a line like that. He took a grim and ironic pleasure from the possibility that what little learning he had managed to acquire had led him to this knowledge, that in the long run, all things, even the learning that let him know this, were futile and empty, and at last diminish into a nothingness they did not alter. I don't like often stop and like, I don't often read anything and like put it down and like gaze up and be like, Jesus, like how did that just touch to the inner workings of my soul? But it did. In reading this, when I was kind of in that binge of like, I just read 85 pages, I put the book down for the day after that line. I was like, I need a moment. Like, I know that might be saying a little over dramatic, but I often don't experience books like this where I can kind of just go like, man, this is like talking about me. Like, it feels like it's talking about me. I'm placing myself in William Stoner's shoes so perfectly, and I think that's what John Williams wants like, a lot, and I think he's capturing that perfectly. The final line that I really just want to point out was, lust and learning, that's really all there is, isn't it? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's right. We just lust after stuff and we learn, and that's basically existence. We lust after love, sex, money, drugs, people, connections, emotions, and then learning is we learn about these experiences. We learn knowledge. We learn how to communicate with others. We learn how to operate a car. We learn how to take care of a house. It's just learning, and lusting, and that's it. That's our human existence. And narrowing it down into 2 words is fascinating, and I'm very curious to see like how this just, if this were to kind of get out more in the general public. I know for me that as a teacher, I think this is the book I could teach. And that might be the ultimate approval of this book to me, is I read this and I went, I want others to read this. I want to teach this to students, not necessarily in a way of like instructing it in an academic sense, but just discussing it and seeing how this book operates within a high school kind of environment. And maybe it's not appropriate for high school students. There are elements of sex and a little bit of violence in there. But really, I think it's just, there are moments in this book that I think are so universal that people should just read it. And I really just think that there's something truly magnetic about this. It's a story about love. It's a story about love persisting, not just in others, but in your hobbies, in your interests. But it's persisting in spite of that dreading nihilism that the world is fleeting and meaningless, and death is this constant force that is moving closer and closer the older that you get, and it's never ending and it's unstoppable. It's kind of the idea of you just hit an immovable object and then that's it. But like, it's finding that love in this kind of dark and dreary and pointless world, and the love can come in many different forms. And to me, I do think this is a book about love. I think this is a book about love and finding love in the meaningless, and finding that light and that point and that influence and that identity in the meaningless, in the dark existence that is human beings. But at times then we still have that burden of, there is this great unifier, and the great unifier is death. And I know this is kind of a morbid topic, but I sat on this book for a week just trying to piece together my thoughts on it, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. It's one of the most impactful books I've ever read. It feels like the continuation of Catcher in the Rye, and I don't know what to do with it. I just wanted to talk about it. I don't really have any grand ideas, any grand plans. I just wanted to talk about it, and just wanted to share my thoughts and really just how it impacted me over the course of 2 weeks now. Yeah, I read it about 2 weeks ago, and took about a week to finish it. So thank you guys for listening for this horrible ramble where I didn't really have a structure. I just had to sit down and talk about it. If you like my videos, there's a ton more on my channel. I'm not really going to make this a big promoting one. Matt and I, by the time this is edited and out, I actually did a video where we went into detail about Norwegian Wood on Matt's channel. It's probably like a 35-minute video. That's on Matt's channel. And if you want to see me break down one of the most baffling books, both in a good and bad sense, that I've ever read, I mean, you know my stance on Haruki Murakami by this point, go check out that video on Matt's channel now. I'll link it in the description. It will be on there. You guys know Matt. At this point, you guys know Matt. I feel like I'm going to keep shouting him out because I think his content's amazing, but you know Matt. So thank you guys for watching. This is, again, like a long rambling video that didn't really make a lot of sense, but I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments for me, leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys again soon. Thank you.